The afternoon sun blazed over my backyard as Officer Martinez stood at the edge of my pool, struggling to keep a straight face. Karen, our self-appointed HOA president, jabbed her finger at the sparkling water as though she were presenting evidence in a courtroom. With a shrill voice, she declared, "This is unauthorized private use of community property. I demand you arrest him immediately." The officer glanced at me, then back at Karen, clearly questioning how he'd been dragged into such nonsense. Calmly, I reached into my folder, pulled out the property deed, and handed it over. The corners of his mouth twitched as he skimmed the document. Karen had no idea she was about to become the neighborhood's biggest punchline. It had all started 3 months earlier, when I moved into what I thought was a quiet, suburban paradise. The 4-bedroom colonial wasn't the fanciest house on the block, but the backyard pool sealed the deal. After years of cramped apartment living, I couldn't wait to lounge on a raft with a cold drink, enjoying my private oasis. The pool, installed by the previous owners 15 years earlier, gleamed like a personal invitation during the walkthrough. I signed the papers without hesitation, already envisioning weekend barbecues and evening swims. At first, everything felt perfect. Neighbors waved from their driveways, kids pedaled bikes down tree-lined streets, and the whole place seemed like a sitcom set. Then came the knock on my door. Standing there was a woman in her 50s, blonde hair immaculately styled, a clipboard clutched to her chest like a weapon. With rehearsed authority, she introduced herself. "Welcome to Willowbrook Estates. I'm Karen Henderson, president for life of our HOA." The way she emphasized president for life should have been my first warning. She handed me a thick packet of rules and regulations, then peered past me at the backyard visible through my living room window. Her smile widened, predatory in its certainty. "Oh, how wonderful. You'll be maintaining the community pool. It's such a blessing to have that common space available to all our residents." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "That's my pool. It came with the house." Karen laughed, a tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. With condescension dripping from her voice, she said, "Oh dear, there must be some confusion. That pool has always been considered a neighborhood amenity. The previous owners were so generous about sharing. I'm sure you'll continue that tradition." Before I could respond, she was already walking away, calling over her shoulder about the next HOA meeting. I stood there, packet in hand, wondering what alternate reality I'd stumbled into. Over the following weeks, Karen's definition of community pool translated into free reign over my backyard. I'd return home to find her sprawled on my deck chairs, sipping lemonade as if she owned the place. One Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of splashing. She had let herself in through the gate to do water aerobics. "Good morning," then she chirped, barely pausing her routine. "Just getting my exercise in. The water temperature is perfect today." I was too stunned to do anything but stare as she carried on, utterly oblivious to my discomfort. Things escalated when Karen began scheduling community swim hours without my consent. Flyers went up around the neighborhood announcing open pool times on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The first time, I came home to find 8 strangers in my backyard, kids cannonballing into the deep end while their parents lounged on my patio. Karen stood at the edge like a camp counselor, a whistle around her neck. Beaming, she said, "Isn't this wonderful? Building community bonds." Polite but firm, I told everyone to leave, that this was private property. The neighbors, embarrassed, gathered their things quickly. Karen's face flushed with rage. "You're being selfish. This goes against everything our HOA stands for." After that, I installed a stronger lock on the gate. The next morning, I found a note taped to it in Karen's perfect cursive. "You are in violation of HOA Regulation 7.3 regarding community access to shared amenities. Remove this lock immediately or face fines." I crumpled the note and tossed it in the recycling. 2 days later, another appeared, this time laminated with a list of pool rules she had invented. No diving in the shallow end. Pool hours are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., no glass containers. The audacity was staggering. She was running my pool like the YMCA's aquatics director. I tried talking to neighbors, hoping to find allies. Most shrugged. "That's just how Karen is." Or she means well, Tom, who lived 2 houses down, finally admitted. "She tried the same thing with my hot tub last year, said it was a community relaxation station. I had to threaten legal action before she backed off. Apparently, Karen had a long history of claiming other people's property as communal. But my pool had triggered her ultimate power trip. The situation boiled over when I came home early one day with a pounding headache. All I wanted was peace and quiet. Instead, I found Karen in my backyard with 3 other women, all wearing matching swimsuits, performing synchronized swimming routines. They had a boombox blasting oldies while Karen barked instructions like a drill sergeant. My patience snapped. I stormed outside. "Karen, you need to leave and don't come back without my permission." She climbed out of the pool with theatrical dignity, water dripping from her floral swim cap. Venom in her voice, she hissed. "You're making a big mistake. The HOA board will hear about this." Her retaliation came quickly. 2 days later, while I was working from home, there was a knock at the door. Officer Martinez stood there looking apologetic. Behind him, Karen hovered with arms crossed in triumph. She had actually called 911, claiming I was restricting HOA access to community amenities. "Sir," the officer said carefully, "I need to ask you a few questions about pool access." He was clearly trying to stay professional, but confusion flickered in his eyes. Karen pushed past him into my foyer and announced dramatically, "This man is violating our HOA charter. That pool is designated community property, and he's selfishly hoarding it." By then, several neighbors had gathered on their lawns, watching with rapt attention. For them, this was better than any soap opera. I held up a finger. "Officer, I'll be right back." Then I walked to my office and retrieved the folder I had wisely prepared after Karen's earliest intrusions. Inside the folder rested my property deed, the original survey and documentation from the title company. I calmly handed everything to Officer Martinez and explained, "As you can see, the pool lies completely within my property lines. The previous owners installed it back in 2009, 3 years before the HOA even existed." The officer studied the paperwork carefully. Karen craned over his shoulder, her face draining of color by the second. Clearing his throat, Martinez read aloud. "Property boundaries extend to include all structures and improvements, including the 16x 32-foot in-ground pool and the surrounding deck." He glanced at Karen, amusement tugging at his expression. She sputtered in protest, insisting, "But the intent was always shared by the previous owners. It's been understood for years the pool serves the community." Martinez shook his head firmly. "Ma'am, intent doesn't override property law. This gentleman owns the pool. If you continue to enter without permission, you risk being charged with trespassing." The neighbors couldn't hold back. One stifled laughter with a cough, another whispered loudly, "Told you she was wrong about that pool." Karen's face cycled from red to purple as she pleaded with the crowd. "You've all enjoyed that pool. Tell him." But everyone suddenly found their shoes fascinating. Nobody dared side with her now. Martinez returned my documents with the faintest smile. "Sir, you're entirely within your rights to restrict access. Ma'am, I strongly advise you to respect those boundaries." After issuing a formal trespass warning and noting it in his report, he left. Karen stood frozen on my lawn, her self-made empire crumbling. Mrs. Chen called across the street, "Karen, we need to talk about your behavior. This has gone too far." Others nodded, and Tom added, "I think it's time we call a special HOA meeting about leadership changes." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Desperately, she muttered, "This isn't over. I'll review the bylaws. There must be something about implied community usage." But by then, people were already walking away, shaking their heads. The special meeting was held the next Wednesday at the community center. I attended as a homeowner, carrying my deed and the police report. The room was packed. Every seat filled, people lining the walls. At the board table, Karen sat flanked by 2 uneasy members. Trying to assert her usual authority, she began, but Mrs. Chen cut her off. "We're here to vote on your removal. Karen, your actions have embarrassed this community and exposed us to legal risk." Karen launched into a defense about preserving resources and traditions, but the room wasn't buying it. When she claimed the pool had always been for the community, I stood and presented documentation. The original HOA charter, pulled from county records, made no mention of my pool or property. The vote was quick. 28 for removal, 2 against. Only Karen and her ally, Deborah. As the decision was announced, her polished facade cracked. Slamming her hand on the table, she shouted, "You're making a terrible mistake! I've dedicated 7 years to this community." Tom replied dryly, "And in those 7 years, you've tried to claim 3 hot tubs, 2 gazebos, and now a pool. It's time for new leadership." The coup de grace came when the community lawyer revealed Karen had exposed the HOA to possible lawsuits. Worse, she could be held personally liable for harassment and defamation. Her face went white. Then came the final blow. While reviewing records, the lawyer discovered her house at 42 Willow Lane sat 15 feet outside the HOA boundary. She had never been eligible to serve on the board at all. The room erupted in gasps and laughter. Someone muttered, "7 years of her nonsense? And she wasn't even supposed to be here." Humiliated, Karen stormed out, heels clicking on the linoleum, car screeching away. 2 weeks later, I floated peacefully in my pool as my new security system chimed. "Welcome to private property. This pool is not community property. Have a nice day." I'd programmed the message for amusement whenever someone neared the gate. The new privacy fence and cameras kept me at ease. Karen's final humiliation came when she was billed $5,000 for the lawyers. Emergency consultation, personally liable, because her authority had never been valid. Tom later told me he spotted her at the grocery store. She ditched her half-full cart and bolted to her car the moment she saw him. Her reign was over. She couldn't even complain at HOA meetings anymore. She'd never belonged in the first place. As I drifted in the pool, drink in hand, I smiled at the irony. The woman obsessed with controlling others' property had never controlled her own HOA membership. The speaker chimed again as a delivery truck passed. "This pool is not community property." "No, Karen, it never was."